right, so I'm going to talk about today about the importance of narrative and the importance of words. I'm a writer, I'm a professor, and I run a nonprofit organization for women and children who have been trafficked and enslaved, so modern day slavery. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was accepted December 10th, 1948, by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris, France. It was created in the shadow of two horrifying world wars, where there were millions upon millions of deaths, and where our technology had obviously far outweighed our consciousness. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt, the president, I'm here in America, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the president, the first lady of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was put in charge of creating this document after World War II. And we don't hear enough, not only about women's contributions to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but women from non-Western countries, especially in South Asia. So I've chosen to focus on South Asia. That is where I do my human rights work. Okay, so we're going to concentrate on two women who helped create this: Hansa Mehta of India, okay, and Begum Shasta Ikramullah from modern day Pakistan. And here's a quote she wrote, but there is a Declaration of Human Rights, a Charter of Human Freedom, and the oppressed and their champions can at least refer to it when those who have seized the reins of power try to trample on the people. The struggle between right and wrong continues, and it continues today in every country around the world. All right, so I'm going to start with Hansa Mehta from India, who was the only other woman on the first council with Eleanor Roosevelt to create the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And by the way, if you don't know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is foundational to our modern day world about human rights and what that means, and how every human being, no matter where they're from, no matter what gender, no matter what religion, no matter what nation, that every human being has these rights, and they're innate and you are born with them. And that's a foundational document. Hansa Mehta was born to a scholarly family in the state of Gujarat in western India. When she went to college, there was no space for for women, so just her and a couple other women would have to sit in a tiny room by the stairs at the lectures so they could hear. She graduated with honors and continued her studies in journalism and sociology in England. And while she was there, she befriended a lot of activists and advocates, and that really woke her up. She arrived back in India after being in England, and then she did something unheard of. She actually married a man for love from a different caste. She was from the highest caste, and she married for love, and she was, uh, put down by many, many people, and but she had a lot of deep courage. Um, At the same time, you all know Gandhi because we hear about the men all the time. Gandhi was asking women in India to campaign against foreign-owned stores, right? To help boycott and campaign to get the British out and to stop colonization. Mehta herself organized over 1,000 women to picket in Bombay. She then went on to serve in the Bombay Legislative Council. She also joined the All Indian Women's Conference, an organization representing the diversity of women. She became the only female delegate on the Commission on Human Rights There was only two women, Meta and Eleanor Roosevelt, in 1947 and 48. Now, here's what we have to thank her for, and I want everybody listening and paying attention very closely because this is the power of words and the power of cultural conversation. In the beginning, the first article was written, "All men are born free and equal." It was Article 1. And Meta said no. Meta and other women, non-Western women, said it should not say just men. It should say all human beings. And at first, they didn't get it. The Western people were like, that's ridiculous. All men, it's understood to be all men and women. But this is actually revolutionary in terms of women's rights and minority rights because in many parts of the world, you say all men and it will be taken as all men. And she explained that where she comes from, that's what would happen. So, this is the importance of narrative, of words, and of listening to people of different cultures and the ability to communicate with each other. Eleanor Roosevelt would later say, here, I'll skip this and I'll tell you, in a speech at Columbia University, a couple years after the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, she spoke about the commission and about using all men in their draft and about how Hans and Meta right away saw something in our document. Hans and Meta and other women from the East, our document that we brought to them, which we had not given much thought to. As we presented the document, it was perhaps a little too Anglo-Saxon, a little too much like the American Declaration. It said all men in the beginning of a great many paragraphs. The final article reads, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. The women said, in this document, we are not going to say all men, because in some of our countries, we are just struggling for recognition and equality. Some of us have come up to the top, but most others have very little equality and recognition and freedom. If we say all men, then when we get home, it will be all men. So you will see in this declaration that it starts with all human beings in Article 1. And in all the other articles, it says everyone, no one. It says, it occasionally says his or hers, which was a little awkward, but is very clear, inspired that this applies to all human beings. And here is a picture of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights written out, and the women, the non-Western women surrounding it and pointing out that importance. The other woman that I'm going to highlight, who was a very important part of the words, the semantics, and us giving the narrative today of their stories, which we do not hear enough of, was Begum Shaista Ikramullah. Please forgive my pronunciation. And I can't begin to pretend to understand the courage of these women and their strength and courage and outspokenness. Begum Shaista Ikramullah was born in 1915 into a high-status family in Calcutta. Her mother was a liberal doctor. Her father was a liberal doctor, while her mother was a more conservative. Ikramullah grew up balancing the two. She was the first female Muslim woman to get a PhD from the University of London and was socially privileged enough to question purdah. And for those who might not know, purdah is a South Asian practice that involves the seclusion of women from public observation through concealing clothing and in the home, high-walled enclosures, curtains, and screens. The practice still exists in certain areas of South Asia in varying degrees. As Pakistan became a country, as India was breaking up, there were only two female representatives in the first legislature of Pakistan in 1947, and Ikramullah was one of them. She was able to debate women's rights with religious conservatives while remaining faithful to her Islamic beliefs. So it's not like she turned against her religion or Islam. She was able to use Islam and looking at the laws, etc., and breaking it down and argue for women's rights. Again, she used to get the Islamic personal law of Sharia approved in Pakistan's first legislature, which recognizes the right of women to inherit property, receive equal pay for equal work, and achieve equality of social status and equal opportunities. While a number of conservative male colleagues object, the law is voted through with the help of Pakistani women protesting outside the legislature. So she also helped to get a lot of women outside the legislature protesting for these rights of basic equality. Now, just 2 years, actually, no, I'm sorry, only 6 weeks after Pakistan is formally established, Ikramullah is asked to represent the new country at the United Nations. She was a delegate to the General Assembly's Third Committee on Social, Humanitarian, and Cultural Matters, which in 1948 spent 81 meetings discussing the draft of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 81 meetings, that's a lot of meetings. And I can tell you that there is no word in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which wasn't looked at very carefully. These people took it very seriously, especially the women, to make sure that they would not be left out of this fundamental document that was creating the really first foundation for human rights in the modern world. Ikramullah advocated for emphasis on freedom, equality, and choice in the Declaration. She especially championed the inclusion of Article 16. There's 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I would say if you guys have not read it, please do today. Just Google it, read all the 30. Know your human rights. You have to know your human rights. Article 16 is on equal rights in marriage, which she saw as a way to combat child marriage, which is still rampant today, with often horrifying results. Combat child marriage and forced marriage. As she said, she believed all civilized countries can accept Article 16, which she reads as designed to prevent child marriage and marriages contracted without the consent of both parties, and also to ensure protection of women after divorce and the safeguarding of property. And she continued her work. Both Hansa and Bikram did. They stayed in touch with Eleanor Roosevelt, and Eleanor Roosevelt talks about, staying in touch. Not only that, recently, Hansa Meta Memorial Dialogue was created at the United Nations. On its second edition, the president of the General Assembly, Abdullah Shahid, said this: "Without a doubt, Dr. Hansa Mehta's contributions demonstrate the power and necessity of having women at the table. Her change to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights underlines the argument that without women policymakers at every meeting, at every discussion, at every negotiation, women will be omitted." So part of her fight in advocacy for gender equality We must make sure that women are at the table. Otherwise, they will get left behind. Currently, we see still rampant inequality. Here are some numbers for the COVID-19 pandemic. More women lost their jobs than men. And still to this day, many women have not returned to work, and they are still straggling behind. UNESCO estimates that 11 million girls may not or continue not to have returned to school. And also, this is a horrifying number. Sometimes numbers numbers make us forget the humanity in it, which is why narratives and stories are so important to collect the personal stories. Globally, over 240 million women and girls aged 15 to 49 have been subjected to sexual and or physical violence in the last year. That was a couple years ago. Things have only gotten worse as our global economy is falling. And by the way, these are just the numbers that we collect. The reality is the numbers are far worse than what we collect. They're just hidden, and it's often very hard to get the full numbers. Let's go to modern day slavery. Over the last 5 years, the number of people in modern slavery rose significantly. So, for instance, something like COVID or global backlash, it always hurts the most vulnerable. 50 million people, for example, were living in modern slavery in 2021. All right, so compared to 2016 global estimates of 40 million. So in just a few years, it went up by 10 million people. And it continues to rise. It's continuing to rise. So we all have, who are living maybe more privileged lives, the responsibility to pay attention to what is happening and try to raise a voice to those who are living in very, very, very vulnerable circumstances. And always it falls to women and children who are disproportionately vulnerable. 28 million are, just to give you a breakdown of what modern slavery is and where it goes, what it is used. 28 million people who are enslaved are in forced labor. 22 million trapped in forced marriages. And by the way, this occurs in almost every country in the world and cuts across ethnic, cultural, and religious lines. It hits all of us. Okay? So we think that some people say, oh, that's not here in my backyard, but it's everywhere. Commercial sexual exploitation. Forced commercial sexual exploitation represents about a quarter of all forced labor. Almost 4 out of 5 of those in forced commercial sexual exploitation or prostitution are women or girls. So the average age around the world of a girl who is trafficked into the sex industry is 12 years old. In 12 years old, a very young age. In where I work in South Asia, it's usually younger. The average age, we've rescued girls who were 7 years old. Many of them are born into brothels, and then just when they get to a certain age, grow up with their mothers there in the brothels, and then they begin working at a very, very young age. Um, Almost 1 in 8 of all those in forced labor are children. Okay? So we have an enormous problem with child labor, even though these laws are put out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that this is wrong. It has not been accepted as a rule of law. It's more like norms that we should follow. Unfortunately, people do not follow these norms. Forced marriage. An estimated 22 million people were living in forced marriage on any given day in 2021. These were they did really strong report in 2021, but they've only grown worse with ever since then. This indicates an increase of 6.6 million since 2016. So things continue to get worse, which is why I'm here today trying to raise awareness about this important issue, because those who have voices need to speak on behalf of those who are voiceless. But the true incidences are far greater. Again, these numbers, no matter what the numbers are always much higher than what we can get. Again, these are closely established to long-established patriarchal attitudes and practices. And the overwhelming majority of forced marriages, more than 85%, were driven by family pressure. When there's economic issues or the family can't afford to make a living, they easily sell off their daughters. That's just understood. How oftentimes girls get sold into the sex industry. Say in Nepal, which is this tiny landlocked country between these two rising industrial giants of China and India, they have an open border with India, say. The traffickers just come up to these very poor villages where families can't feed their family, and they say, well, we'll take your daughter, we'll buy her for $52. We'll have her go work in a factory in Mumbai, and she'll make a good living. And a lot of the families will say, okay, that sounds good. Oftentimes, girls are sold by family members. And they know where they're going. They're being sold into these brothels. I have been into these brothels. If you've ever been into one, I have met these girls. I have collected their stories. It is you will never sleep well again if you see it. The level of human rights abuse and the devastation that is there is it changes you from the inside out if you see it. A lot of us walk by this stuff every day and just don't pay attention, but we have to, I would say. Again, when it comes down to gender equality, there's so much more women who are hungry, women and children that are chronically hungry, chronically uneducated, etc. But here's the good news. I want to give some good news because I don't want you to leave you just feeling like, oh my God, this is horrible and hopeless. The good news is that when we educate girls, it completely changes the dynamic of a society. When a woman is educated, when she knows how to read, her child has a 50% more chance of living. All right? For each year that a girl is educated, it puts off her having a child for about 5 years and getting married. It empowers them. When women are part of society, say when women are in government or professionals or educated, There is better health care for all of society, men and women, regardless of gender. There's better schools. There's less corruption. There's less violence. The governments are much less likely to go to war. Uh, and all sorts of the quality of life goes up exponentially. Um, so when you empower girls, you are empowering families, societies, nations, and you are changing the entire dynamics of how our world is run. For instance, uh, here is a very disturbing statistic. No offense to all of you men out there listening, but when a woman is working, she'll put in 90% of her earnings back into the family and back into uh, the society and the nation and lift everything up. When a man works, he only puts in, where the woman puts 90% of her earnings back into the family and society, the man will put in only 30%. This is averaging out, right? The rest, I don't know what they're doing with their money. Gambling, going to those brothels, who knows what. So women have, I guess, a stronger sense of community and family, and that is why it's conferences like this are so important to lift up the voices of women and empower them, um, and truly change the dynamic of the world. So while I've given you a lot of bad news here, at the end, there really is good news. And that is why we at the Blue Butterfly Foundation, uh, here is, we believe in um, educating girls, creating schools for girls, going around to families and explaining why they have to put their daughters in school, creating opportunities for young women in all sorts of ways, going around and teaching human rights, doing teacher training, starting micro lending and starting women's groups, helping to advocate in all sorts of ways. Our language matters, how we speak matters, and these stories matter. And I would ask if anybody has any questions or wants to get involved. Here is please be in touch. My name is Lauren Yanks and wants to do